Welcome to Noelle's Nook. Come on in. A fun book just for you. Take a look, it's being read. I'll read aloud. You can listen anywhere. Activities to do and ways to grow. I'll read aloud. Fun for everyone. Take a look, it's being read. I'll read aloud by Noelle. Come into Noelle's Nook. Let's read a book. Hey guys, welcome back to Noelle's Nook. I'm so excited you guys decided to come back because today we are going to read a fun and exciting book that I loved as a child. And I think you guys will enjoy it too. Today we're going to be reading Harry Potter. Ooh, so exciting. And if you've never read Harry Potter, you're really in for a treat. While I'm reading the book to you guys get to do a fun activity. You guys are going to write down characters' names and write character traits about them. So say I'm reading a story about Sally, and Sally has pink hair and a nice smile, then I'm going to write down that Sally has pink hair and a nice smile. So this is what you're going to do for this characters in Harry Potter. Time to read Chapter 1, The Boy Who Lived. I wonder who it is. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you would expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they didn't hold with such nonsense. Mrs. Dursley was the director of a firm called Crunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that someone would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. The Potters? I wonder who they are. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended she didn't have a sister because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as un-Dursley-ish as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never ever seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull gray Tuesday, our story starts, there was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dudley gossiped away happily as she wrestled a screaming Dudley into his chair. None of them noticed a large tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Dursley picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Dursley on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye, but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal at the walls. Little tyke, courted Mr. Dursley as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he had noticed the first sign of something peculiar. A cat reading a map. For a second, Mr. Dursley didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to look again. There was a tabby cat standing out on the corner of Privet Drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Dursley blinked and stared at the cat. It stared back. As Mr. Dursley drove around the corner and up the road, he watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said Pivot Drive. No, looking at the sign. Cats can't read maps or signs. Mr. Dursley gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove towards town, he thought of nothing except a large order of drills he'd be hoping to get that day. But on the edge of town, drills were driven out of his mind by something else. As he sat in the usual morning traffic jam, he couldn't help that there seemed to be a lot of strangely dressed people about. People in cloaks. Who do you think they are? Mr. Dursley couldn't bear people who dressed in funny clothes, the get-ups you saw on young people. He supposed this was some stupid new fashion. He drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. His eyes fell on a huddle of these weirdos standing close by. They whispered excitedly together. Mr. Dursley was enraged to see that a couple of them were young and all. Why, the man had to be older than he was and wearing an emerald green cloak. I wonder who he is. The nerve of him! But then it struck Mr. Dursley that this was probably some silly stunt those people were obviously collecting for something. Yes, that would be it. The traffic moved on, and a few minutes later, Mr. Dursley arrived in the Grunnings car parking lot, his mind back on drills. Mr. Dursley always sat with the back to his window in his office on the 9th floor. If he hadn't, he might have found it harder to concentrate on drills that morning. He didn't see the owls swooping past in broad daylight. Those people down the street did. They pointed and gazed open-mouthed as owl after owl sped overhead. Most of them had never seen an owl. Even at nighttime. Mr. Dursley, however, had a perfectly normal, owl-free morning. He yelled at 5 different people. He made several important telephone calls and shouted a bit more. He was in a very good mood until lunchtime, when he thought he'd stretch his legs and walk across the road to buy himself a bun from the baker's opposite. He'd forgotten all about the people in the cloaks until he passed by a group of them next to the baker's. He eyed them angrily as he passed. He didn't know why, but they made him uneasy. This lot of were whispering excitedly too, and he couldn't see a single collecting tin. It was only on his way back past him, clutching a large donut in a bag, that he caught a few words of what they were saying. The Potters. That's right. That's what I heard. Yes, their son Harry. Mr. Dursley stopped dead. Fear flooded him. He looked back at the whispers as if he wanted to say something to them, but he thought he'd better not. Here's a tip if someone else already checked out Harry Potter. There are lots of other books that are like that, so I will share them with you guys. And don't forget to pause on the picture to read the description of the books. First, we have Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. We have Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. Red Wall by Brian Jacques. Goblins by Philip Reeve. Fablehaven by Brandon Mull. And The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. There are so many books out there and so many books to read if you like Harry Potter. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Noelle's Nook. Tune in next time for our Halloween party! Yay! See you guys next time. Bye!